Hi, I'm Bill Berg from Mountain Made Music, and I'm going to show you how to restring a mountain dulcimer. Um, there's several tools that you'll need, or should have. One is a good pair of wire clippers, needle nose pliers. This is an awl, which comes in handy in removing the strings from the pegs. A tapered stick, which doesn't look like much, but it comes in handy just to get the strings off of the nut in the saddle. Sidewinder, which of course unhandles the strings, untunes the strings. Then you can also use a cleaning pad. I like to use a little Windex to wipe off the instrument to keep it clean. And if you don't have a coating on the fingerboard, if it's a oiled fingerboard, you can use this cutting board oil to resurface the fingerboard. Okay, the first thing to do when you're restringing is you have to loosen the strings. That's when you use your sidewinder. They don't have to be totally slack, just loosened enough. Okay, after they're loosened, you can cut all the strings. And try not to stick yourself. Remove them one at a time. This is where your little awl comes in handy. You can stick that underneath the strings and loosen them. There are different methods of having the strings attached to the bottom. This particular instrument is using guitar pegs, and on other ones of my instruments, there may just be little brads on the bottom. Those are much easier. Just they just fall right out. If you have the guitar pegs like this, there's normally a little notch on your string winder, and that's actually made for pulling these out. So you just stick that underneath there. They come out fairly easily. Yeah, try not to mar the finish with that. At this point, since when you get the strings off, it's a good time to just clean up the instrument. And all my instruments have a lacquer finish, which you should not put oils or wax on. Because if you do, they do get scratched, and there's no oil or wax on it. You can easily just put a little bit more lacquer on it. But if there's oil or wax on it, it won't adhere. So what I like to do is just use a little Windex or some other this type of cleaner, spray it lightly, take a clean cloth, and just wipe the thing off. Okay, another thing you can do is clean up the frets using a Scotch-Brite pad. You can find these in hardware stores that don't have any soap or anything on them. So I guess the Brillo pads would have soap on it, but you want to get just the plain ones. And it just kind of shines up the frets. And kind of cleans the fingerboard at the same time. If you don't have lacquer on the fingerboard, and if it's an oiled fingerboard to begin with, this is cutting board oil, and that'll kind of resurface the fingerboard. Okay, now we're ready to restring it. I use certain gauges of strings. For the first two strings, I use 011 plain string. For the middle string, I use 013 plain. I use a high octave note next to my bass string, which is 009 plain. And then I use a 024 wound string. It could be bronze or nickel wound. I usually use nickel wound. I start out with whatever tuning head is closest to the nut. With this one, it's the 011. Once again, if you're using a guitar string peg, there's a little groove on the side of them, and that's meant to hold the string in place. So you put that in front, kind of pull up on the string and push down at the same time on the peg. I use a method where I kind of tie the string in, and this, prevents slippage. So on a guitar like Machine Head, you always go to the inside, go under the string, and I'm messing it up, and over. Then another thing, I want to keep a little tension on the string at all times. Another thing I also want to do is wind the string so it goes down the peg, the machine head, and not up. So that kind of gives you a little leverage. And remember, these are like little tiny needles, are real long needles, easy to put one in your finger. Okay, for the next string, I go to the other side of the peg head, and this time it's going to be the bass string. Remember to kind of pull up on the string as you put it in. On the bass string, you don't really have to do that little tying thing, because it's kind of abrasive. You want to leave about 3 inches of slack, and they say put a little pressure on the string so it's doesn't go slack. Okay, this is where your little stick comes in. It's helpful to use this just to get the slots in the proper place. This time I'm putting in the 009 string, which is the octave note. Okay, finally this is the 013 string, which is the middle string. Switches around again. Okay, basically strung. Then you want to tune the instrument, of course. When I restring an instrument, I always like to stretch the strings a little bit to take the slack out of them. Don't pull so hard you're going to break them, but just a little bit. When I tune the instruments, I sometimes use an A440 tuning fork, which is the same as the middle string at the octave. And you can, I'm just touching that at the octave, which just makes it ring, or you can press down if you need to. Then you go back to your bass string, 4th fret will be the same as that note. The 7th fret octave is the same as the little octave note. And that is going to be the same as the first 2 strings in the Mixolydian tuning. Ta-da!